Welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. I'm Dr. Kyra Kendrick, Director of Membership Engagement at Women Leaders in Sports. My leadership philosophy is rooted in purpose, connection, and intentionality. I believe that we were all placed on this earth for a specific purpose, and part of being a good leader means figuring out what that purpose is and then executing it in a way that is beneficial to others. Another part of my philosophy of being a great leader is through connection. I don't think that we can walk through this world alone, and the importance of having connection and community are something that not only shouldn't be taken for granted, but are also something that other leaders need in order to be successful. The last part of my philosophy is intentionality. It's great that we have purpose and we have connection, but we must be intentional. We must show up to certain spaces as ourselves, and we must make sure that we are being intentional in our conversations and in our actions before, during, and after we leave a space. The Dr. Charles Whitcomb Leadership Institute helped me hone these skills. I love my cohort and the 3 years that we spent together, and all it did was teach me that showing up authentically and being vulnerable can only help you be successful as a leader. I hope that you enjoy the episode.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. Our guest today is Brandi Stuart. Brandi is the Deputy Athletics Director for Administration and External Operations at Penn State. Greetings, Brandi. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. Now, you've been in this role for almost a year and a half, been in the college athletics industry for over 20 years, with stops at Texas Tech, Central Florida, Florida State, Alabama, ACC. At some point, you were over like the California Interscholastic. What exactly was that you were over?
Yeah, California Interscholastic Federation, better known as the CIF. It was high school sports.
Oh, yeah, CIF. I'm from Los Angeles, and so LA was weird coming up because we had the LA City Championships, and then you had the CIF Championship, which is crazy.
Yes, because LA City was on its own, but they were part of CIF, but still kind of on its own little island, but they were still part of the family. Yep.
So, softball at Florida State, right?
Yeah.
That's a big transition coming out of high school, but you came out when the time Florida State football was on top of the world, right?
Yeah.
And so that was an exciting time to be in school. Now, you were an exceptional softball athlete who, I don't know if you consider yourself a superstar, but if you're in somebody's Hall of Fame, you're pretty much a superstar. Do you acknowledge that you were good as an athlete?
I would say that I could hold my own.
Okay.
And, I think all that's relative, right? Like for my time and my genre, I was a pretty good athlete. But I mean, I came out in my time frame, like in my class, I had Natasha Watley, I had Jenny Finch, I had Crystal Bustos, I had Marissa Young. There were just some really legit athletes. And a lot of us at that time, we were also it was one of the starts of the generations where a lot of the California kids started to go out and play outside of California and Arizona too.
Okay.
So it was a pretty cool time. But yes, I was a pretty decent softball player.
Okay.
And happened to do fairly well at Florida State.
Right, and earn a spot in the Hall of Fame, which is excellent. So softball is, well, at the time it was a passion. You actually chaired the NCAA Softball Committee. Am I saying the name of it right? Yeah, and you served on the committee another time too. That means it's more than like you love this thing of ours called softball.
Yeah.
Tell me about serving on the committee in terms of like being the person actually serving as the chair of the committee, being the person to coordinate everything, right? From selections of teams to play in the championships to everything. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, so first, I think committee work is really important. As an administrator, as a sport administrator, I think committee work is important for us to serve not only our institution and our student athletes, but our conference. It gives a lot of insight that we can bring back to our campuses. I mean, there's some things that have to stay in the vault. What happens on the committee stays on the committee, in the room, all of those different things. But there are a lot of things that you can bring back and a lot of nuggets that can help not only your institutional program, but also your conference and helping all of your other conference memberships, your member schools get better, be better so that you can be stronger in NCAA postseason. But serving on the softball committee was obviously really special to me, just to get back to the sport, but also to be able to grow the sport. When I was on the committee the first time around, it was from 2008 to 2012. And that's when we were growing in Oklahoma City. The sport was continuing to explode. Sharon Cessna was working at the NCAA at the time, and she was really pouring into the sport, working with Oklahoma City to figure out the types of investments that they were going to put into the venue and the stadium. So all of those things were really cool to be able to watch, but then also being able to grow the game in terms of the practice playing season, the format of the tournament itself. So we went to, from a regional to a World Series format to a super regionals format. For rest and recovery to mirror more of the World Series format with the men. And so we were able to just continue to grow the game. And then fast forward to my last serve from 2016 to 2020. That's when I was able to serve as the chair in my last 2 years from 2018 to 2020. Those years were really special for me. It's a lot of work. It's a grind. It's a working committee. Not only do we sit there and we handle the selections and we figure out who's going to be in the field of the 64. Obviously, we figure out who's going to be the 32 at-large teams because you have the other automatic bids. But also, we were able to figure out the format of the single game championship series. So during that period of time, we went away from the double elimination where teams were just playing back to back to back to back games. And then you had championship series where there were teams that were playing for the national championship game, and you can be playing 2 games in a day or, 3 games in 2 days in order to crown the champion. So we changed the format so that was, again, more of a championship feel. And then in 2018, as the chair of the committee, I was able to hand the national championship trophy to Coach Lonnie Alameda at Florida State, who in 2007, Monk Bonassort at the time, who would have been like a deputy at Florida State at the time, he and I sat in a room and interviewed 3 or 4 coaches at Florida State. And Lonnie was the person that we chose to be the coach at Florida State to take over after Coach Graff retired. So he and I hired Lonnie. Fast forward 11 years, I have the opportunity to hand her the national championship trophy when they won the first national championship trophy in a really long time.
Yeah,
so,
that's excellent. That's a crowning achievement to feel good about, right?
You
can't beat that.
It's real full circle, right? Yeah. And I tell people all the time. So when I played at Florida State, my junior year was the first time that FSU softball made it back to the World Series in a decade, probably a little bit more than a decade. And what I try to tell young people all the time is you may not ever see the fruits of your labor, right? But you never know when you're going to be able to see the fruit, it come to fruition, right? Mm-hmm. It may be the bricks that you put in the house. You might not see it built, but at some point you might see the house being built and people walking into the home. And so handing her that trophy was people moving into the house and being able to live in the house. And it was really cool. It was just a really surreal moment.
Yeah. You've worked at a number of different institutions throughout time. And when I look at those institutions, correct me if I'm wrong, had you worked with the athletic director at Penn State before?
No, so not directly. Mm-hmm. So Pat and I met when we were both in the American. So he was the athletic director at Temple when I was the SWA at UCF. So we were both in the American Athletic Conference at the same time, and that's when our paths originally crossed.
Excellent. And so you always hear, I worked in the football coaching profession, and even now when I work college athletics adjacent, you always hear that who you work for is of the utmost importance. A, because of it can help your career, but B, because you want to be in an environment where the leader is creating and maintaining an excellent environment that you want to be a part of. So tell me about, when you get a call about being a deputy at Penn State, is a significant position for somebody that you met and I guess develop a relationship with. Did you make calls outside of Pat to figure out what it's like working for him, or did you just trust in the relationship that you had built with him over the years?
So I did make one phone call. So there was the unique part about working in the American Athletic Conference when we did at the time was the way that we were set up was we had athletic director liaison. So we had one athletic director that worked with our SWAs pretty closely.
Okay.
And then we had SWA chairs, and the SWA chair would sit in on the AD meetings for the year. And so I happened to be the SWA chair around the time that Pat was the AD liaison.
Oh, to the SWAs.
So I got to spend a lot of time with the ADs, and he obviously spent a lot of time with the SWAs. So we got to see him a lot, and he advocated for us a lot, supported us a lot. So we got to see there was a lot of consistency with who he was, who he said he was, how he showed up for us.
Yep.
And then at the time, Jocelyn Fisher, but now obviously Fisher Gates, was his SWA at Boston College when he and she got together, and they were working together for a while. And so when Pat called me about this job, Jocelyn and I knew each other when she was at South Florida. So we were all in the American at that time. And so I just called Jocelyn and just asked her, hey, talk to me a little bit about Pat. And she and I had some conversations, and she just said hey, who we have seen him as and who he has presented himself as is absolutely who he is. And we were both moms of young children. I'm a single mom. And so having somebody who can support what it means to be a single mom and understanding having young children and being in this business was really important to me, but it didn't take much. I mean, he is someone who I've always kept in contact with. I'd always bounce ideas off of him. He never ignored a phone call or a text message. In the times that I've ever reached out to him, and the conversation that we had on the front end of him having conversations with me about this job and this position, we're pretty forthcoming and really transparent. There's a lot of alignment there between the two of us. So it didn't take much convincing, but I only had to call one person.
Yeah, which makes an excellent transition. And in the year and a half, when we talked offline, when I saw you a few weeks ago, you said the environment is great and you like working there. So that means the relationship was real. The call worked for you.
Yeah.
And the person is the person who is leading the department. Okay, so you're hired in Deputy Athletics Director for Administration and External Operations. What would you consider your primary responsibility to be?
Between the two of those?
Just as the Deputy Athletics Director of Administration and External Responsibility, if you were to explain what you got 1 or 2 sentences talking to somebody at a golf course, telling them what you know what I mean? How do you explain your primary responsibility?
My primary responsibilities are facilitating and navigating any type of problem solving that I need to do within either of those units. Okay. So basically my job is to manage those 2 areas and make sure that we're efficient in either of those spaces as they relate to student athlete experience and their functionalities either on campus or externally with fan engagement. So on the administrative side, there's a lot of interaction on campus. There's a lot of interaction with student athlete interaction, student athlete experience. So my job is to facilitate all of those different levels of engagement and interaction, whether it is campus entities, whether it is relationships that we have with folks that we need to be able to manage. On the external operations side, we obviously have a lot of interaction and engagement with our fans. And so we're focused a lot on how externally we're interacting, we are impacting our fan engagement, and then we are marrying our student athlete output from...
Well, basically how you're telling the story, right?
Yeah, it's not only how we're telling the story, though.
Okay.
So it's a lot of like the marketing and the video productions. So it's really how we're managing the relationships between our production of the event itself for our student athletes and the games and the competitive components, but
Mhm.
also just like the live interactions that we're having with our fans, how we're creating spaces for our fans to enjoy the atmosphere in addition to the competitive event itself. And then also, we just want to make sure that our student athletes are having a good time.
Yeah,
So
I,
we need to balance all of this.
I think what you're saying is excellent. Let me rephrase, or let me give some context to the term telling the story. Right, telling the story. You can look at it as just external communications, right? Letting
Yeah,
people see what we do, but you can also look at it as student athletes that making sure the story they experience is an excellent experience, making
yeah,
sure fans experience an excellent experience at a competition, which is also a story that they're telling. In my mind, I've
yeah.
come in the last year that telling the story is basically rooted in everything, especially in college athletics that we do.
Yeah, and making the connection, right,
Hmm.
between um it's making the connection between what we are doing in our spaces within our different venues, right? So we want to make sure that there's some connectivity. When we first got here under Pat's leadership, if you went to each of our different venues, you would have unique experiences in each of our different venues with no connective tissue. So now what we're trying to do is ensure that regardless of where you go, whether it's a baseball game, a
Hmm.
gymnastics meet, a track meet, a swim meet, a softball game, that there's some connective
Yeah,
tissue
right. There's a
within
continuing
each of those
story. Yeah,
experiences that reminds you and lets you know that you're at a Penn State event.
exactly.
And so we're also just trying to make sure that like everybody's thoughtful in what they're doing and that we're also intentional in everything that we do so that people understand that like everything is Penn State. It's not just Penn State football. It's not just Penn State basketball that we care about, that every event that we host means something to all of us,
Yeah, like you
right?
said,
So
like you,
we have to make sure that all of those things have some connective tissue with them as well. So
right.
just trying to modernize, but also be very intentional with how we connect with our fans and we connect with our external alumni and folks that can't make it to all of our events. To your point, how we're telling those stories, but also how we're creating those experiences for those who are in venue.
Yeah, like you mentioned, or like you hinted at earlier, we are, right? You want to make
Yeah,
sure the storyline continues throughout each
yeah,
venue and everybody knows. So
the feel.
is that something that in the role you're in, Pat has charged you with? Is that one of the things that you make sure that there's a continual experience and story told between facilities, different events, and all that stuff?
Yeah, it's definitely part of the assignment. And so I spend a lot of time with our external leadership group, making sure that we are talking to each other about those different components. I think that our groups do a really great job within their specific units having those conversations. I don't know that we've been really intentional about coming together and having really thoughtful collective discussions about how we do that. What I'm finding is that it wasn't common practice for a lot of group share and group think and throwing things up against the wall to see what sticks and like having some really constructive conversation. It's okay to agree to disagree. It's okay to ask people questions outside of your unit. And it's not throwing shade. It's not in having some type of indictment with somebody else. It's really just asking a question or throwing out any type of suggestion or recommendation like that. Oh, that's okay. We're all here to make each other better. Iron sharpens iron. And so I'm really trying to create that atmosphere within all of our different units of like collaboration. That's okay. That's what that
Do
means.
you see that happening now? I mean, are you moving towards and you see that collaboration coming
I
to
do think that
fruition?
we're getting there. We're breaking down some of those barriers and some of those previous norms of what communication used to look like. It's taking some time and normalizing communication in a different way, showing them what leadership looks like in a different way, and empowering people to lead from where they sit is also very uncomfortable for people from different lenses. And that has been interesting and an interesting journey. I've gotten to where I am because people have provided me with a lot of access and a lot of space to be able to speak and to learn and to listen. And I tried to provide that for people too along the way. And what I'm learning is if that hasn't been a natural path for people, when given that space, it can be very uncomfortable. And if you're uncomfortable and you're not exposed to it, or it isn't something that you're accustomed to, then you don't really know how you're supposed to react in it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And also, if you've never been exposed to it and you've been put into a space of leadership or supervision, you don't know how to manage it with your direct reports, and you don't know how to open up that space for others. And so I'm trying to manage throughout, top, bottom, and in the middle. And so I'm really trying to create that space for folks so that it's not territorial, and it really is community oriented.
Yeah, what you're saying, Brandi, is actually a pertinent problem, with humans, period, right? We are a comprehensive collection of our experiences and our reactions to those experiences. So then when we get into new experiences, a lot of us only base on the experiences we've had and don't know how to react in new experiences. But you're also saying that it is important that we train people how to learn how to exist in different environments, because people get into these leadership positions and now you're leading people and you're going to lead based on the limited experiences you have. And that may not be good for the people you're leading or the organization that you're charged with being a leader within.
Yeah.
So you got to expand people's minds. I think that's excellent, Brandi. And it's excellent and very intuitive to see that the problem is multi-layered and address it so that Penn State can be better off, and also so that the people within the organization can be better off too. So this deputy role, I was looking at the titles from your previous positions. I think you were deputy at UCF at some point, right?
Yeah.
Texas Tech, I don't know if you were deputy, but when you look at what you were doing, it seems like you were taking a bunch of stuff off the athletics director's plate. Yeah. Tell me about your philosophy on leadership. I imagine it's probably rooted in a lot of things you just explained to us in terms of helping people see that they can all do things outside of what their experiences are.
Yeah, it really is just that. I have been really fortunate early on in my career that I had really great leaders who, again, brought me along with them. They empowered me and expected me, though, to listen, learn, but contribute, like get in the mud, be a part of the solution, and learn, though, along the way, and contribute to the solution. And that is how I lead. When I step into an organization, well, first of all, anytime that I'm taking a job, I am always asking the athletic director, the person who's interviewing me, what is it that you need? And so if I'm hearing from them what they need, and I know that I have a skill set that meets that need, then I'm going to take the job. If it all works out, obviously. Right.
Yeah, everything else.
And so if I know that I can come in and I can help them with what it is that they need and fill the void, then that's the first thing. The second thing is I have to make sure that they also know and understand who I am as a person. So my personality, the way that I approach things, the way that I speak, because I'm not everybody's cup of tea either. Like, I'm also very upfront and I'm honest, and I infuse a little bit of humor, but I'm also like, all right, like, let's hit it. And I need to know from you, if I'm your supervisor and you come to me with a problem, I need to know from you, how do you want to do this? Do you want me to help you? Do you want me to solve it? Do you want me to support you? Like, you let me know how you want to do this and then let's hit it. But when I come into an organization, if I know what the issue is, then I'm going to come in and solve it. Don't hire me if you don't want to solve problems and you don't expect me to come in and address those issues. As I come in, though, I do try to identify who the people are who also want to help. So the people who want to help and the people who want to be led, or want to continue to lead, like I get them and like, let's hit it, let's ride.
So you identify, this is interesting to me, and I wonder how long it takes. Identify the problem solvers, the people who want to improve, the people who are leaders right off the bat, almost so you know who to put in the car or on the bus with you when it comes time to solve problems. Yeah?
Yeah.
How long does that take? You've probably done that in every organization you've been in. Like, is that immediate? Like, or tell me how long that takes to do that.
It doesn't take long. It depends on how the process works. So if I have officially interviewed for a job and I have an opportunity or like formally interviewed for a job and I have an opportunity to meet with particular people, then during the interview process, I'm able to kind of at least identify as people are asking questions or some of their answers. I can try to like weed some of those people out early on. And then as I come in and when like things get real, because like during the interview, it's all roses and candy. And then when I come in and it gets really real, then you start to see like real reactions, right? So yeah, I think it's you can do it pretty quickly to be able to screen the people and see who's willing to, again, kind of like stand in the mud. But like it takes work to change.
It does take work. So tell me about that philosophy when you're hiring people. Like how can you vet that during the research and interview process, right? And have you missed before on that?
Oh, I've missed.
Okay.
Yes, I've missed. So, and the tough part is I've missed on some people that I knew.
Yeah.
Like people I thought that I knew that knew me. And when it came to like working with and for me, they didn't realize what it meant to work with and for me.
Okay.
So, I don't hire people that I know as much as I used to, unless I've actually worked with them.
Right.
Like if I just know you as a colleague, I probably won't hire you unless we've actually worked together. So when I look for people that I want to hire, I am very upfront and very honest with folks. The way that I recruit coaches and the way that I recruit administrators, I have a lot of really in-depth conversations with them up front. And I'm very honest about what you're going to be coming into, who I am as a person, what I'm looking for in this role. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about what's important to you. Talk to me about what you want out of this experience. What are you looking for next? What are you going to need from me? What are some things that are concerning to you? What do you like about what you're currently doing? What do you want out of what you're currently doing? If you were to come here, what do you think you would miss if you were to leave your spot? Like, we need to be in this. So like we talk a lot and we keep it a buck because I don't want you to come in thinking like, ooh, she didn't tell me about this. She didn't tell me about this. Like we need to trust each other. And you need to come in saying like, okay, she told me the truth and it is what it is. And I need to feel the same way. So I try to be very, very transparent with people.
Yeah.
And it's just been a lot of time talking to them.
Do you have, I'll ask a couple questions here and then we'll wrap. In terms of that process, do you have a go-to conversation topic or go-to thought process for this is going to sound crazy, but for disqualifying somebody in the interview process? Like they're not answering this question good, or there's something about how they're weaving in and out. I mean, is there some kind of process or evaluation point that you have? Because it sounds like this is very important. Obviously in an interview, and this is a very important part, but it sounds like you've put a whole lot of thought into this.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm sure that there is. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I can name it, okay, but I'm sure that there is. Like there are some questions for me that I'll ask that based on the answer, and they're character-ish questions that I'll ask that I'm like, no, that wasn't it.
Do you avoid making the face you just made when you make that?
Yeah.
It's hilarious.
I like to ask questions depending on the level of position that I'm interviewing somebody for. I like to ask, and this isn't like a end all be all, but I like to ask, if you were to get this job, what's the one phone call that you could get that would entice you to leave this position?
Okay.
And the answers that people give are very telling to me in terms of like where they think they are in their trajectory for like their profession. So that's always an interesting question for me, and how honest they choose to be. I don't know that there are any other like staple questions that I'll ask.
Okay.
But I have this ability to, and this isn't like a Jedi mind trick. This is just legitimately, I'm an easy person to talk to. I have an ability to because I'm genuine. So people will just talk. And so I have a knack for active listening. And so like, as people are talking, and if they say something, I'm like, oh, tell me more about that. And then as they're talking more, then I'm thinking like, okay. And if there's a pattern of either like a tone or a storyline or something that keeps coming up, then it's kind of like, okay. Or I've been on, like, I'll talk to somebody and I'll be on the front end of recruiting somebody. And then we'll get in a group and I'll bring them to like the search committee or whatever. And then let there be like some men or some other people that are on the search committee. And then they start talking to particular people based on either how they look or what their gender is or whatever. And then it's like,
oh yeah, I see
those
what's
things
happening.
are interesting.
Yeah, right.
So just like some of the little tells, I think are things that I just look for. But
okay.
I try to hire good people that I think will be good teammates, and people that will be coachable. It's not always the smartest person. It's not always the most decorated person that has the best resume, because I think you can always teach people and coach people certain things, but you can't always teach people not to be a-holes. You can't always, teach people to be better teammates. And in this day and age, with where we are in this business and the time that we spend together, the amount of investment that we make, and the way that we're going in staff and just in the direction that this business is headed, you got to have good teammates around you and good people around you that are willing to jump in the mud. And like, that's few and far between.
Right. I'll ask two questions before we wrap. The first one is you mentioned before that you have missed on people you've hired.
Yeah.
You hired somebody, but I wonder, thinking about that, inverting that question, have you hired somebody that you were questionable about, which is probably not a good practice, but have you done that? Hired somebody you were questionable about and they ended up being superstars?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So what made you, okay, now I got another follow-up. So what made you hire them if they were questionable? And then what made them a superstar?
I hired them because I needed the person.
Okay.
And I had somebody who gave me a recommendation. And so on the strength of that person's word, I said, okay, because I need this person. I need somebody now.
Yep.
And they killed it.
What made them a superstar? Oh, what was questionable? Hold on, before we even escape the underlying thing here, what made them questionable? It was questionable because you didn't do a good vetting process, or was there was something about them that gave you a little pause?
No, questionable just because I didn't know enough. Like, there wasn't enough information and not enough of a resume for me to really know whether or not the person could actually do the job.
Okay. So you depended on the trust of the reference, which is very important in our profession. And then tell me what made them great when they actually came in and started doing the job.
Oh man, just the rapport and the work ethic and the buy-in and the impact that they made on the people that they served. It was just unreal. Okay. And the amount of love and effort that they put into the work, and then just the catapult and growth was just amazing.
Okay.
It was really cool.
Okay, excellent. Last question here. We opened up talking about your accolades in softball. and the passion you have for the sport. I wonder. And so I'm a football guy, and people don't play pickup football much. Basketball, people play pickup basketball all the time. But I know softball, people who never even play softball for intramurals, for work professional league. Do you still play softball, and are you still good at playing softball?
This is a rude question.
Is it rude? Wait a minute.
I do you know the answer to this question. I happen to, on a certain night of the week, there are a handful of us in the athletic department who play on a slow pitch team.
Okay.
And we get together and we have ourselves a good little time. And so, yes, we play in a league that is just, it's fun. It's for fun. It's a great time for some of us to get together. There's some administrators, there's some coaches.
Okay.
And it's been a lot of fun. It's a good time for us to get together and not think about work, or sometimes think about work and get some stuff done on the side, but it's fun. So yes, we do play a little bit of softball. It is slow pitch. There are no expectations. I tell people to manage their expectations.
Okay.
And my son's out there and he keeps score and he tells all of the tales of what transpires out there on the field. So,
but okay, so I got another couple follow-up. A, you didn't answer whether you're still good or not, but then B, I want to know.
It's all relative.
Does someone who played softball at a high level and are playing now later in life have to identify that it's slow pitch? Like, is that a necessary qualifier? Because you said that 17 times. I just want to make sure and understand about softball and how
you
the language.
Absolutely do. They're two totally different sports.
Right.
Number one. Number two, like, I wouldn't go play pickup fast pitch softball. Ain't no way.
Okay.
I'd have to stretch and practice for a year before I go out and play with any of these young bucks out here today.
Okay.
And three, yes, you have to qualify that it's slow pitch so people can manage their expectations.
Okay.
I'm not an all-American slow pitch softball player, but I will go out for fun.
Okay.
And have a good time.
Fun, right.
And people should not expect anything other than that.
No, I get it. By the number of times you said fun tells me, okay, you manage expectations here, broski.
Yeah,
we are not out here trying to win the championship.
But I do keep track of my hits. I do. There's still some pride.
Okay.
But, manage your expectations.
Well, Brandi, this has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here on the One Question Leadership Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That was Brandi Stuart. She's a Deputy Athletics Director for Administration and External Operations at Penn State. And of course, I am Tai Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.